Thank you very much. Okay, everyone, welcome to Unleash Your Play Brain. It's always a joy to be near the end of the day because, true play is always risky play, challenging play that people might fall asleep. So the key thing we need to know, and I hope we'll stay friends by the end of this session as well, is that true play is also safe play. So you choose how much or how little you'd like to get involved, and if you need a break, then sustainable pace. So if you'll stand up. And there's no need for phones, really. You can take pictures all you like after, and I think you get a lot more benefit if you just focused and enjoyed this. Okay, are we good? So, the first thing to do is set your feet hip-width apart. Okay? And just be aware of your neighbors and all that, safe play. What I'd like you to do now is just roll your head around one way. Really important to warm up just before we play. We don't want to strain anything. And then the other way around. Symmetry and equality in play. Okay, we're good at this. Okay, so let's stick our hands up, our arms. Just rotate your wrists. I suspect some of us have done more typing than socializing, but however we have fun, it depends on how you play. So we'll get warmed up for this evening as well. So hands on your hips, and when you're ready, just do a little there we go, hip twist. Feels good. Excellent. And the other way. See, I told you, value for money. You're warming up early for the party. Okay, let's just take a deep breath in. Deep breath out. Okay, breathing is important. So when you're ready, follow me. 1, 2, 3. Head, shoulders, knees and toes, knees and toes. Head, shoulders, knees and toes, and eyes and ears and mouth and nose. Head, shoulders, knees and toes. Faster. Head, shoulders, knees and toes, head, shoulders, knees and toes, and eyes and ears and mouth and nose. Head, shoulders, knees and toes. Bravo! Grab a seat. So that may be the scariest or most courageous thing you're going to do in the next couple of days. So now that we've got that out of the way, it'll make socializing even easier. So my name's Portia, and I'm the founder of the School of Play. And what really gets me going is the opportunity to promote happier adulthoods for lifelong play, because play isn't just for children, it's equally important for adults. So I'm a bit of an agile geek as well, so I've prepared a user story that hopefully we'll be able to tick off by the end of our time together. As a play seeker or play skeptic, you choose. I need ideas on how to play more so that we can all live happily ever after. So some success criteria. By the end of the talk, hopefully we'll all raise our hands and tick it off. I have a working knowledge of play. I can explain the importance of play. I have one or more ideas to play more. And I've had fun. Okay? Are we good to go? Oh, okay. Now you're worried, aren't you? I can tell. So today we're going to cover 3 sections in the talk. The first one is the play, the science of play, and why it's important to do it. The second part is the play brain. And then the third, of course, is your play future. So I wondered if the organizers has told you that you needed to prepare for a play assessment. They didn't tell you. You didn't study for this. All right, well, hopefully your life to date has prepared you for this. So anyway, we'll move on and we'll do our best. So what you're about to undertake is an assessment. You will be shown a series of images. And when you see the image, if you consider it play, then you shout, play! And if you look at the image, you go, oh no, that's not play. You say, nay. Okay, are we ready to play? Yay! Very good. Okay, I like that. Improv, making it up. That's all it takes. Right, ready, steady, go. Play or nay? 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 Okay, well, let's see what the computer says. Phew, we can play on, so well done. So as a play researcher, I get asked two very common questions. The first one is, why should I play? And that's become an increasingly pressing question and concern because a lot of us now, especially the younger people amongst us, who do startups and it's their own businesses, it's almost like, I guess, their baby in some way. They're in their late 20s or even early 20s and they say to me, Portia, you know, I get up at 4 or 5 a.m. in the morning, I go for a workout, I'm at work by 7, I'm home by 11, I have to do a bit more work, and then I may be in bed by 12 or 1, and then I'm up again and good to go, and I am living my life's purpose. So why should I play? You know, I love my work, I'm living my passion. Why should I play? Well, hopefully, from our talk and our time together today, I'll leave you to draw your own conclusions. Because after all, who am I to tell you what to think? The second question that I get asked is it okay for me to play? And actually, it's rare that anyone ever asks me this question explicitly. They kind of will just come up to me and go, yeah, can you just explain what play means again? I don't think your talk covered it. Or they will say, I play, some competitive mobile game non-stop, and when I get angry, I tend to throw my phone against the wall. This is my 10th phone. Okay? So the key thing to remember is that true play is safe play, fun, and something you enjoy. So you don't need to ask anybody what play means to you because you need to define it for yourself. And we'll dive into this a little bit more. So what is play? So there's a great book on play called Play by Dr. Stuart Brown. And he says that play is seemingly purposeless. The key word is seemingly. I have yet to come across any form of play that is purposeless. Because even when you've had a really tiring or bad day at work and you go home and you think to yourself, I'm just going to consume. No, I'm going to devour one box set of Game of Thrones. I don't think I need a time machine for that before dawn, but nonetheless, I'm going to do my best. And your partner comes in and asks you, why are you binging on Game of Thrones again? You've watched this like 10 times. And you say, no reason. I just need to do this. But actually, the reason you're doing it probably is to de-stress. So there you go, a reason for playing. So play is only seemingly purposeless. It's also voluntary. So often, after these talks, people say to me, well, that was all really good, Portia. So my biggest problem is my team won't play, So how can I, make them play? And I look at them and I think, well, certainly not like that, because that's the thing with play. Play is about not just role modeling, but putting yourself out there and daring to be seen, right, for who you are and playing the way you want to. It's also inherently attractive. So what you may notice is both in the office or maybe out in the streets or in the park, you can hear some laughter or some unusual noise or rustling. And when you look around, you see someone else in the office having fun. And it's only natural that your curiosity is piqued and you kind of just sidle over and say, well, I just need your signature on this whatever document. And then you kind of have a look at what they're doing. And that's an indication of play, right? When it looks attractive and you kind of might want to get involved. So another element is really about flow. Time flies by. Play, in my experience, is the quickest and the most enjoyable way of getting into flow. Yeah? And that's why it's so important as well that with play, it's about sustainable pace. Another really important element of play is that it reduces a sense of self-consciousness. Yeah? So what's happened now with neuroscience and all these new discoveries is that when you are curious, your brain is unable to be judgmental, pretty much nasty, but judgmental at the same time. And given curiosity is such a big element of play, isn't that lovely that you're not going to worry about what people think about your tabs or your spaces, which IDE you're using. They're simply pairing with you because it's fun. Now, wouldn't that be wonderful? Another element of play, of course, is the potential for improvisation. And, I've met a whole bunch of lovely friends today, Jessie and April, and just playing with them has made me realize that, improv is simply an imagined reality of how we can live, and it's always been innate to us, much like play. Yeah? So as you improvise, that's where the creativity and innovation happens. And the last but not least, of course, is that it's the desire to keep going and going and going. And that's why when we play, we can dig deep and find the resources we need and the energy to keep going on. And that's why you'll find that the most happy and people who can continue striving and persevering, often they are the most playful. Yeah? So, why should we play? Well, for some very important reasons. The first one is that it shapes an organism's brain, and what's really interesting is that neuroscientists, psychologists, social scientists, lots and lots of different sciences have now agreed, and it's rare they agree, that play is really part of why we've evolved. And if it were not useful, evolution will have refactored it out. It makes animals smarter and adaptable. It's all about variety of play, but really about building social relationships. So did you know that if you didn't play enough between the ages of 0 and 5, and when we say play, we're talking about, playing with each other, toys, affectionate touch-like hugs. If you didn't get enough play between the ages of 0 to 5, your brain can be up to 30% smaller. Now that's how important play is. Also, it enables us not just to build, but sustain social relationships. Yeah. It always interests me when people say, well, I don't really like networking at the conferences. What do I say to people? I don't like chit-chat, all of that stuff. But actually, it's a skill. And when you're authentic and you're truly interested in what the other person has to say, then that's the first step. And you know what? If after a certain period of time, both of you or one of you decide, actually, I think that glass of orange juice might be more interesting to me right now, that's okay. You just end the play and you say, I'm going to go get a drink now. Thanks for your time, and you move on, right? But there is a real skill to this. And I think sometimes in our current day, we turn too many of these things into, economic interactions. And there's so much more to life than money. There's play. And then, of course, play fuels creativity and innovation. So what I really recommend you do is, after our brief 45 minutes together, just start paying a little bit more attention in the next day or two, even over the next week or the next month, and see how your life might slowly become more playful than it is already. So if we were to summarize, what is play really? It's fun, it's flexible, and it's freely chosen. So that is why, in so many ways, play is really complementary to agile. And when I say agile, I mean the way it was intended to be. Yeah, not the way that frameworks and consultants tell us we should behave. So what I'd like you to all do now is if you could all stand up. Okay, now some of you are like, well, she made us do the hardest, scariest thing already. Why is she making us stand up again? Okay, so when was the last time you played at work? Oh, wow, fab. Okay, so if you played at work in the last month, stay standing. Okay, well done. So if you played at work in the last week, stay standing. Okay. Now you're starting to eyeball each other. This is a good thing, because these are the people you really want to network with now. If you played, the day before coming to the conference at work, because I know some of you might have been on a course, at work, then stay standing. Okay, so feel free to just have a good look around. Yeah, these are probably the people you want to ask how they've achieved that, because it's possible. Great, round of applause for everyone. Grab a seat. So being play researcher, I obviously needed a model. I have a few. So along the x-axis is the desire to play, and along the y-axis is the know-how, how to play. Yeah. So the top preference is can play and want to play. So you are able to play and you want to play. Then there are the type 2 preferences. They can't play, as in they don't know how. It's not that they're stopped, but they don't know how. But they want to play. So they're the ones who, you know, when they hear the noise in the office, they'll kind of sidle over and, you know, go, oh, I'll go to lunch with you. Where are you going? Yeah. And then there are the type 3s. They're the ones who can play, but, oh, won't play. I mean, you know, the office, work, it's a career. It's a ladder. I'm not a monkey. It's not a tree. But I shall scale it and climb it. And I do play plenty. I am the champion of my local golf tournament. I'm fantastic at play. I just choose not to play at work. Yes, what a scary thought. And then there are the type 4s, those who can't play and won't play. So these are people typically who have forgotten how to play, and that's very easy to do. I myself forgot, and that's how I got into play. And actually, I never learned enough how to play. And then also for the type 4s, maybe they just never had a chance to learn how to play. Now you're going to say, well, but Portia, you said play was innate. Yes, it is, but as we all know how it works with our brain, right? The connections get pruned off if our environment and our experiences tell us it's not important. Yeah, and that might well have happened to some of us. But of course, we all know now that the brain is plastic. So if you haven't had enough play, what's there to stop you having more? So, pop quiz. What's the opposite of play? Let's have some guesses. Taxes. Okay, taxes. There's one down here, no? Work. Okay, thank you for getting the elephant into the room. Boredom, okay. And one more? Anxiety, thank you. So, imagine a world where there are no movies, no jokes, no storytelling, no music, no daydreaming. What are we left with? Well, I have some good news for you. It isn't work. So you'll be able to be delighted when you go back to work on Monday. According to Dr. Stuart Brown, play leads to creativity and innovation, which in turn leads to invention and growth. And of course, a typical example of that is, you know, Apple, for example. Then you've got work, but work also leads to creativity and innovation. And I believe that many of us in this room have experienced this because, of course, the techie crowd, of which I have grown up in, are some of the most playful and hopeful people I have ever met. And that's why I'm so proud to be here and to just share this with all of us. The other curious thing about work that play doesn't give us is purpose and competence. So although I was born in Hong Kong and I'm Chinese, it wasn't until I read in an English book on organizational change that the words work in Chinese is sang yi. And if you were to translate it literally, sang yi, it means meaning of life. So it has already been encoded in front of us. So many of these facts of life that we want to believe in, they're already there, right? So at this point, you're going to say, what is the opposite of play? Let's just play again. Come on, 3 guesses. Pain. Stress, thank you. One more. Slavery. Yeah. So you see, play is a very deep subject. It's not something trivial because it reaches far into who we are and what it means. Well, it turns out that in its simplest explanation, the opposite of play is depression. And I remember that as I read this book on my way home from, doing agile training from Chicago back to Heathrow in London, I read it and I was like, oh my God, what am I going to do about this? I have to tell everybody because, people just ought to know so we have options, You want to kind of go into this with your eyes wide open. So I started telling my friends about this, and I talked to one of the technical architects I knew, and I said, let's make up a name. I said, Bob. I said, guess what the opposite of play is? I don't know, work. And it's all the same motions we went through. I said, it's depression. And I wanted to see what he would say. And he went, that's great. I was like, oh God, I think he's gone mad. And he said, well, now I know what it is, and I know what the antidote is. I can handle it, right? And that's the beauty of knowledge. And of course, being a play researcher, I then did a bit of mapping, and I said, well, you know, the type ones, the can play and the want to plays, they're in a pretty safe zone and quite a way away from that red line of depression. As are those who can't play, but they want to play, and they also work very hard. And then you've got the type 3s and type 4s who are kind of getting much closer to the red line, and often it doesn't take much, you know, to tip us over. There you go. Knowledge is power. So, what I'd like you to do now is you're welcome to consult a friend to answer this question. How many squares do you see? Which is the correct answer? So don't shout it out yet. Is it A, 17, B, 26, C, 30, or D, none of the above? You have 20 seconds. Feel free to consult a friend. Don't shout the answer. Go. Okay, so let's just take a deep breath in. That was quite intense, right? Let's take a deep breath in. Calms down your parasympathetic nervous system. It's a good thing to breathe. Okay, so if you think it's A17, raise your hand. Oh, okay. Thank you. We've got one person for that. If you think it's B26, raise your hand. Okay. And if you think it's C30, raise your hand. And if you think it's D, none of the above, raise your hand. Right. So according to a very reliable source, the answer is D. Why is it? Now, you know, you can all tell me about it tomorrow and explain it to me. But it turns out it all depends on how you define a square. Because you know, ooh, there, can you see my little laser? So you can even, you see that little space there? That also could be considered a square. Yeah. And I think that's such a telling example of how it all depends on what we define and how we define something, doesn't it? And how often we get into arguments and huffs at work, and then we take it home and stress out at our family about it, and then probably, you know, spend the weekend mulling over it, thinking how the other person is a complete idiot for not knowing that the answer is clearly 30. Yep. So, how many squares? So why should adults play? Well, it turns out it's the same reasons that children need to play. It breaks down barriers between people. What's the shortest distance between two people? Speaking? A smile. That's right. You know, I once used to work in, twice I worked in a place called Canary Wharf in London. It looks, to me, when I was very young, it looked a bit like Blade Runner. And I remember going past it, going through it via the Dockland Light Railway, and that was a monorail. It felt very fancy, and I thought, wow, it's such a cool place to work. And then ironically, when I finally got to work there, I started to feel actually slightly depressed, just with a lowercase d, and I couldn't figure it out. And it wasn't until I went to work there again the second time, madness, to kind of encounter negative things twice, but that is life, I started realizing that it was about the amount of space, square meters you had, and the number of people in that space. And when you are in Canary Wharf, a lot of it is kind of, not underground, but it's indoors, and a lot of like tunnely shops and things, which means there's lots of people funneling in and out in very enclosed spaces. That in itself isn't too bad, because that could be like a concert. But the problem with Canary Wharf is nobody would look at you. In fact, they would go out of the way to avoid you. They'd look down, they'd bump into you. And that was actually really distressing, right, to my amygdala, right? Because it's like, oh my God, why am I not being recognized here? I'm a human being. And that's so important, right, for our brains. to be aware that we are okay here. We are a part of a tribe that's not going to harm us and all of that. So it's really important to recognize that all it takes is a smile. You don't even have to say anything, just smile. Yeah. And it opens the mind to enable learning, opens heart to create a connection. It's a source of joy and a source of hope. So it turns out there's a recommended daily amount of play. It's about 5 to 10 minutes a day, so it's not all that much. And in particular, 1 day of play lasts up to a week. So you're going to say, well, Portia, how do we know that? Well, according to Dr. Brown, if you think about the weekend, if you play on 1 day, that's pretty much enough to get you charged up for the week ahead. And in fact, Fridays are typically people's favorite day if they're not doing what they love, because they have the whole weekend. And then Sunday evenings, it turns out, is the least favorite time of the week, because it's very easy for people to start thinking about work again. And the key thing here about play as well is, binge playing isn't good for anybody. Just like binge programming or binge gaming or binge chocolate eating. It really is about sustainable pace, little and often. And the thing I've noticed is that people who stay together, people who play together, stay together. And I remember when I had my little girl, this is 6 years ago, it was a very distressing experience, apart from all the kind of, birth giving and enabling human life. It was the fact that I realized I'd spent most of my adult working life playing with adults, much like we're doing here in workshops, one-to-ones and sessions and all that, but I didn't know how to play with children. And I didn't know how to play with my child. Because you know what? Children call BS like that. They know when you don't know what you're doing. They can hear it in your voice. They can smell it. Yeah? And they'll soon let you know when you're really boring, Mummy. I'm just so bored. Right? And I think that's the key thing. So the harder it is to do something with somebody, the more important it typically is. And play falls into that category. So, next, let's look at the play brain. Who here has come across Dr. Steve Peters' book called The Chimp Paradox? Raise your hand if you have. Lovely. It's a really good book. I'd recommend, if you had short of time, just to read the first 90 pages or so. So Dr. Steve Peters is the in-house psychiatrist of the Sky Pro cycling team for Britain. And in the last Olympics in London, out of the 12 medals that we brought home, 8 were gold. So you tell me if that model is worth learning. So let's have a quick look at it. So in its simplest form, the psychological mind, and I'd like you to just do this with me if that's okay. So take a hand, hold up a hand. Right, so if you bend your thumb in, this is what's your amygdala. We're going to model your brain. It's useful to do this because you can do this with your small children and even your teenagers, and they'll soon get it. So this is your amygdala, and Dr. Peters calls this your chimp. Yeah, it's the piece in you that cares about, food, sex, sleep, all that stuff, and probably a lot of fun. Then if you close your fingers around, what you've got here is the frontal part of your brain, right? That's the newest part of our brain. That's our thinking brain. That's our human bit. And then just around the back on the top is kind of the parietal brain. And that's the computer. Yeah, that's where our habits, our prejudices, all the things, we know it all, live. Now, what's really interesting here, and it's a very little known fact, is that actually all input into our consciousness, if you like, is actually passed through the chimp before it reaches the human. So when we have difficult moments or arguments with people, and they say, well, you're far too emotional, you need to be much more rational, ideally like a robot. That is simply not physiologically possible, because information is going to the chimp first. And it is the chimp who decides whether or not it will pass the information on to the computer or the human. So sometimes your human doesn't even get a look in. And it's important to know that the chimp is 5 times stronger. The chimp is 5 times stronger than your human. So imagine trying to arm wrestle a chimp. Yeah, only bad things can happen. So, what can we do with this chimp? I'd like us to try a quick exercise. Again, if you could turn to a neighbor, but maybe a different neighbor this time. And we're just going to treat your chimp to a bit of play. Just for a couple of minutes, I'd like you to turn to your neighbor and share with them the name of your chimp. Just take a deep breath, possibly, and have a little think. Because sometimes a name will just pop into your head. Right? I know that's happening to some of you statistically. I know this is true. So name your chimp. And then have a little play with your chimp and kind of just say, say to your friend, okay, well, my chimp is this name. I'll tell you mine about later. What do they like? What really don't they like? And what pisses them off? Okay? The chimp likes to be heard. They like to be seen. And just, be kind when you talk about the chimp. It's your chimp after all. It's still part of you. So I'll just give you a couple of minutes. Find a new friend. Go. Okay. So, can we just maybe share a couple of chimp names? Who'd like to just call out the name of their chimp? Donald. Excellent. Okay. We'll have two more. So. Ooh. Thumb. Oh, your chimp's name's Thumb. Oh, there we go. Thanks, Thumb. And one more, I think we had around. Yes. Daisy. Maisie. Sorry. What is it? Crazy. Oh, chimp, crazy. Sounds cool. So my chimp's name, when I found myself asking this question, just popped into mind and went, Charlie. It's Charlie. And I was like, oh, hello, Charlie. And it's curious, because some days it's a boy and some days it's a girl. Like, oh, nice to meet you, Charlie. Now, you probably think this is a bit mad, and this is the thing with play. If you didn't feel a little bit mad or silly when you're doing it, then it's not true play, because true play, like I said before, is risky play. And Charlie's a curious creature for me, and when you look at Dr. Steve Peters' work, he talks about, strategies for managing your chimp. And I just don't like really being managed. I just think, well, if we hired people who were self-organizing and motivated, why would you possibly need to manage them? So I thought, well, I don't really want to manage my chimp by boxing them. In fact, that's one of the names of the techniques, boxing the chimp. Oh, that sounds terrible. Or they say things like, like you would tame wild horses by throwing a rope around them, but, slowly rein them in as they kind of run around and run around. I thought, oh, I would never want to do that with my 6-year-old. It just doesn't feel humane. So instead, I regularly have conversations with Charlie. So Charlie feels listened to. And of course, from a psychological perspective, by externalizing this, it's a really useful thing because it gives you distance and perspective. And when you have that, suddenly things don't look so scary, right? And you can develop a lot of compassion for yourself. So I'd like to just play with your chimps for a little longer, and we're going to do an experiment. And the question is this. So this time, turn to a different neighbor. Now, hey, listen, I did say pairs, but of course with play, it's about being resourceful and innovative. So if you find yourself sat somewhere, but you just want to take part, but everyone's in pairs, just form 3s or 4s, do whatever you like, okay? But I'd like you just to take a brief moment to share with a new friend your favorite childhood toy. Just take a moment or two to reminisce. Go. Okay. So, well done. Now, can I just have maybe 2 volunteers to share what their toy happens to be? It's just the toy will be fine. A swing? Oh, a remote control car. Okay, let's do 2 more. A pogo stick. Yep, lovely. One more. A computer and a lost cat. A plush cat toy, a stuffed toy. That's a cat. Lovely. Now, lovely. Thank you for sharing. Mine was the Cabbage Patch, if you remember that. I loved it so much, and then eventually I was able to bring it down from the loft, air it a bit after so many years, and my little girl has it now, which is lovely. But the key thing here is this. How do you feel now, since reflecting and reminiscing about this toy, than you did a moment ago, before you did the reminiscing? How do you feel now? Call out some words. Refreshed? Nostalgic? Old? Young? Thank you. Time is relative. We are friends. Anxious? Let's do one more. Relaxed? Okay, lovely. So this is the thing, right? We think our brains are so clever, you know, but actually it's not, right? Just now as you were reminiscing, your brain was reliving the memory and it can't tell you weren't there, right? And that's why it's so important to have friends and to reflect on memories, because you can get that feel-good, you know, hit of, you know, positive hormones and all of those things just by reminiscing. And that's a little treat for your chimp. So let's move to the third part, the last part of our talk, and that's your play future. So really, we live in a day and age where we've got all these technological advances, but in spite of all of that, we still have a very outdated view of human intelligence. What do I mean? So if we were to kind of whiz through the history of time, and this is not exhaustive, I didn't go back to, you know, when it first happened, this thing called humanity. But in the Middle Ages, play was considered at best a distraction in the Middle Ages. And at worst, it was evil. Children were beaten badly, yeah, for mucking around, for playing, when they should have been doing work. Yeah. Then this chap, this English philosopher, John Locke, he started talking about anti-corporal punishment. That means not beating children at school. He talked about it a long time, because in England, it didn't stop until the 70s. And even when eventually an end was put to it, some teachers in the Union of Teachers actually said, there are children who deserve beating. They cannot learn without it. And actually, it was in Poland that in the 20th century, it was the Polish that had anti-corporal punishment put in really, really early. And that's refreshing to know as well. Now, in 1825, there was something called the 3 R's. Reading, writing, and arithmetic. And for those of you focusing, they don't even all 3 begin with R's in the first place. I mean, that tells you there's a problem, right? But anyway, that's how we've been judged, and certainly how I was judged right, 40 years ago when I was being educated, 40 years, and, reading, writing, arithmetic. And if you weren't good at those things, you sucked. You were a loser. You were never going to make it in life. Yeah? I mean, who does trigonometry in the grocery store anyway? So then, in 1916, there was IQ, invented by a French chap. But he was a really good person who was hoping to use IQ to help people understand more about intelligence and help children in kind of poverty to learn. But instead, it was turned into a stick, and we were beaten by it, metaphorically, because it was all about intelligence. And then in 1932, we had Lego. Yay! And that takes us kind of to 1983. Which is the discovery, if you like, of something called multiple intelligences. And I'd like to just take a moment to dwell on that. So how many of you here can actually grow a tomato plant from a tomato seed? Raise your hand. Or do that sort of thing. Okay. So I do exactly what it says on the packet. I have tried several times, but mine always goes moldy. What's more, my husband has nicknamed me the bonsai murderer, so I'm not allowed to buy bonsai anymore. And it just happens that I'm not as good with plants as I am with people. So there you go. And of course, there's a reason for all this, right? If you are good with music, you have an ear for music, or you can pick up an instrument you've never seen before and you can just play it, right? So a good example of this is Louis de Bernière, who wrote Captain Corelli's Mandolin. And I saw him live do this. He was giving a talk about his books. I was feeling very inspired. And then they said, Louis, we've got 3 instruments up here. We've heard you can do this trick before. We know you've never seen them. So he picks this instrument up, and it is a stringed instrument. Some of you might go, it looks vaguely like a guitar. He picks it up and he just plays a tune on it. And he's never seen it before, right? I can't do that. So again, that's another form of intelligence. So in 1983, Dr. Howard Gardner identified 8 intelligences in addition to, right, or including the reading, writing, and arithmetic. And they were things like musical smart, body smart, actors, athletes, people who think by moving around. Doodling. If doodling and messing about and just moving gets your brain thinking, then that's a form of intelligence. How fantastic is that to know this? I wish my teachers at school knew. Then there is the interpersonal smart. Empathy, compassion for others, relating to other people. Wow, you get brownie points for that as well. Word smart, logic smart, nature smart, we talked about the tomato growing, and self smart. What? Self-knowledge and self-awareness is a form of intelligence. Most of us probably know this, right? That's why we're here. And we're also seeing, a trend of technical conferences getting more and more into things like neuroscience and psychology and behaviors. Because we know, I think deep down we know, and according to Adlerian philosophy, all problems are interpersonal problems. Yeah. And for those of us who've been doing kind of coding for a long time, we know the tech will figure that out. That's the people. And then you've got the visual, spatial as well. And now they've said that there's at least 40 of these different ones. So all of a sudden we can become whole and be, granted the chance to be fully ourselves. And the next stage of this is really interesting. The latest theory is the meta-intelligence of human intelligence, which is, if you look at all of these intelligences, there's some fundamental characteristics and skills you kind of need, like problem solving, right? Such as and curiosity and patience and all those things. And they say, well, you know what? Play intelligence, that's the foundation block of all these other intelligences. Yeah, so I'm like, brilliant. So we had IQ, we had EQ, emotional intelligence, now we have play IQ, which makes sense, right? Because intelligence is the mind, yeah, and movement is in the body. So play intelligence. So if we have a picture, look at what lifelong learning looks like. These are some pictures from a workshop I ran called the Curiosity Carousel. And we look at what's happening at the start of the event. It was anticipation, learning how to make a loom band. People are thinking really, really hard. This is my friend Paul thinking, this is harder than I thought. And then smiling faces of, this is vaguely enjoyable. And then understanding, aha, this is where the next move goes. And then showing each other, helping each other out, mastery. And then finally, poise. And this is actually the play process model, right? That Scott Eberle mapped out from his own observations of play. And this is what I don't understand when people say change in organizations are hard. I'm not saying that it doesn't take work. Absolutely, it takes work. But it doesn't have to be full of pain and suffering. For a start, with pain, there are strategies to manage that. But suffering is optional. With a model like this, we can do change that is fun and joyful. Why wouldn't we want to do that? Right? Because people do want to be better. It's an innate thing. And just because I am better doesn't make someone less, and vice versa. So, I promised you a look at your play future. So we're just going to do a bit of a visualization exercise. If you are a very visual person, and 70% of people are, just close your eyes, okay? Because it just helps you really picture what the future looks like, but that's entirely up to you, and I'll just read this out as we go. Okay. Suppose tonight, while you slept, a miracle occurred. When you awake tomorrow, what would be some of the things you would notice that would tell you that your life had suddenly become more playful? You're welcome to open your eyes. I invite you to share some of what those things might look like. How do you know your life has become more playful? More smiling. More smiling? More colorful? We'll do two more. Less stressful? Less frowning. And I love doing this exercise at conferences because I've had people say, there'll be more slides in my life. And he started imagining slides in his office building, like getting from the third floor to the fourth and all sorts of wonderful things. So the key thing is whatever came to your mind, it's all data and there's no need to judge it. It's sufficient to simply observe and see what happens next. So you can discover more about a person in an hour of play than in a year of conversation. So we've just slight of an hour. So I hope that today you've had some fun meeting people and especially in this session. So to summarize, play for your life. The opposite of play is depression. The recommended daily amount of play is 10 to 15 minutes. Play more at work, at home, and at school. And of course, develop your play intelligence, but little and often, and enjoy doing it. And all play. I'm happy to share the slides. I'll tweet them as appropriate. So let's just do the final user acceptance testing. If you agree, then. I have a working knowledge of play. Raise your hand if you agree. Okay. I can explain the importance of play. Raise your hand if you agree. Okay, all useful feedback. I have one or more ideas to try to play more. Okay. And remember those people you were eyeballing who stayed standing and said they played before they came to the conference just the day before? They're the ones to have beers with tonight, as well as others. And have you had fun? Yay! So my final tip is we don't stop playing because we grow old. We grow old because we stop playing. So thank you for playing.
Hey, Portia, thank you so much for this amazing talk.